What's going on, family? Here with another episode of See, Here's the Thing. Got a little treat for you guys today. Normally, Brandon, our other co-host, would be here, but we've got a special guest sitting in. Today, we've got Lamont Corbin. Lamont, thank you for joining us today.
I appreciate y'all inviting me.
Cool. Today, folks, topic is, can the public education system be revamped to cater to the needs of Black students, in particular Black males? If it can be revamped, what are the next steps? And if it can't be revamped, what's the solution? So, Lamont, not to put you on the spot, but you're our guest, so we're going to let you go ahead and go first. What are your thoughts on this?
So there's a lot of variables that come with that. When you have to identify, are we talking about a public school? Are we talking about a private school? Are we talking about a parochial school? With that, what area are we talking in? Are we saying Detroit? Are we saying a urban area? Or are we saying how can we impress upon African American students, African American males, if they're in a district such as like Plymouth or West Bloomfield?
Okay.
All right. So, and the reason I mention that is that, as you know, well, I'll back up for a minute. So I just came from the state of Arkansas on business. And most recently, they put through this legislation where they're eliminating anything associated with diversity, basically eliminating Black culture or the discussion of African American culture within their schools overall. And here in Michigan, you'll have that depending on the district. If you go outside of the Tri-County area, you have that same premise. So the reason I mention that is that depending on where your kid is, it will make it may be very difficult or very easy to address that question. So, for example, we have African-centered schools here in the city of Detroit that already practice that. But that's not necessarily the case outside. So if you're a parent, I like to use the definition of cause and effect and intentionality. So if you're putting your student in that school, the first thing that I would do is to make a critical assessment of how do they teach history. Do they center whiteness by eliminating Blackness? Do they only talk about African American culture when it's Black History Month, when they're supposedly obligated? And how do you augment what they don't teach in school to where you would effectively teach your I don't like to say gender, necessarily where it's just males because it affects the sisters too. How do you fill in those gaps when the school district doesn't particularly have an interest to do it for you?
So you're saying school district. So I want to stick on that that piece of it.
For public schools?
Public schools.
Gotcha.
So we just talking about public?
No. So this
I'm
is
sorry.
why I'm saying that too. The premise that you gave, and I appreciate the context, but I'm thinking more just what you were talking about in Arkansas and more
Mississippi, Alabama,
Florida, and we know Florida is at the forefront of a lot of this because of everything that they're trying to eliminate, DEI and AP, African American Studies, elimination of all of that.
Exactly.
So if we're talking about public school districts, and you're talking about the elimination of African American culture, not just studies, but culture in general, that's where I would want to focus. I know some of the Afrocentric schools that are in urban areas, most prominently, they are considered public schools, but they are most likely charter schools, which they have a lot of not necessarily autonomy in developing the curriculum, but more of a leeway. Even in Michigan, there's been a bill introduced to eliminate DEI.
That's right.
30 states overall have introduced bills or either passed bills to eliminate DEI.
And I'm guessing that these are red states. The majority of them.
Republicans have introduced those bills.
So one of the things that that interests me is think back to pre-1994. Here in Michigan, school districts were funded by our property taxes. 1994, they introduced Proposal A. That changed the game. And we went from getting funding from just property taxes to the federal government, local government, and state government. Well, the problem with that is, to date, federal government contributes about 10%. Okay. The majority of it comes from state dollars. Think about this question that comes up a lot with the lottery here in Michigan. Since 1972, the lottery has contributed $26 billion to help schools in Michigan. Now, with Proposal A, now you've got 3 sources of revenue going into the school. Help me understand how you can figure out Proposal A. Proposal A is, my God, it's hundreds of pages long, and it's so convoluted. Nobody understands. And Carl, when we were coming up, going to school, I don't think we necessarily had issues, from an educational perspective. But now you have, especially our males, it's almost as if we're being attacked because they're not graduating at the rate that they should be. You've introduced things like the low percentage of Black male teachers. Currently, you got less than 5% of the teachers in the United States are Black males. So if I'm a Black male coming up, I don't have a hero per se. I don't have a teacher that I'm looking at where I say, you know what, I can do that. So I think that when we're talking about, the educational system and as it pertains to us, as we were coming up, it's different.
Yes, it is.
It is. It is. And here's the thing too. And I'm glad Lamont is here as a guest because all 3 of us are Detroit Public School educated.
Yep.
All 3 of us work in professional capacities at this time. All 3 of us can name, most likely, a Black male or female teacher that has had an influence on our education and our aspirations. And as you said, I like the way you use the word hero. Not necessarily that I want to be a teacher, but they saw something in us and they were able to say, you can aspire to be more. I think that is one of the factors here. And I know this conversation can go many different ways, but I think one of the factors here is that teachers, the profession of educators is no longer looked at as a noble profession. Not only are a diversity and African American studies programs under attack, but teachers are under attack. You can see it when they're talking about, it baffled my mind when they were talking about mass shootings in schools. And one of the things was, we need to arm the teachers. So you want me to go to school, get a bachelor's and master's degree, incur student debt, deal with man and baby's kids, because I'm gonna have to be a counselor in order to educate, because I got to solve the problems that you got at home, and you want me to be armed, and you want me to put my life on the line
with all the personal problems you have. So now you're gonna give me a weapon,
right? And by the way, you don't get paid a lot.
I think that's one of the biggest issues. Not only pay, but when we were coming up, Carl, to your point, teachers that, showed an interest, I can count, my God, probably about 10 through my whole K through 12 experience. But I look at teaching as a calling. We got a mutual friend that went to Michigan State. He's an alpha. He taught for a minute when he got out. And I remember having a conversation with him, and he said, Gene, these kids so dumb. And I'm like, bro, what you mean? He said, man, they just dumb. He said, they don't listen. And here's the kicker. He said something. He said, I'm just here for a check.
Wow.
Think about that. I'm just here for a check. And these are young minds that you're supposed to be molding. But that's why, it's almost like the priesthood, it's a calling, and our teachers back in the day, for the most part, the Black ones, they cared about us as students,
And I'll even give credit to a couple. I mean, there was some non-Black teachers who were taught in the urban school systems who also saw us as people. And I can name a couple, through elementary, middle school in particular.
Yep.
But I think, kind of circling back, because the teacher thing, that will really get me, because I have I have an affinity for teachers because I think everybody has to be educated in some way. Everybody's going to get something from a teacher. I don't care what you aspire to be or whatever profession you go into. But to get on that track, how, again, if you're eliminating the nobility of educators, if you are taking away subject matter that is interesting to students, I may not be the best mathematician, but if I know that I'm going to a African American studies class, or I'm going to a civics class that focuses on my local neighborhood, my local area, if I'm going to a sociology class that talks about structural or even systemic racism, or how racism, something like the 1619 Project, those things will keep my interest enough in school to keep coming back. So if we are eliminating those things in the public school area, is charter schools the answer? Because, or is, and I know you mentioned private and parochial as well. Everybody ain't got the money for that.
Well, no, I mentioned them from the perspective in that the curriculum may be different from public, or the way that is put forth, so to speak. Listen, I'll be honest with you. I've studied a lot about Hebrew schools and also freedom schools from the civil rights era. And what they do is augment. They have, okay, you have your day 9 to 5 or whatever the school day is, 8 to 3 education on this side, but the after school component and coming back on the weekend, we're going to teach you culturally about yourself, and we're going to bring you up. And it's like, okay, they teaching you this, but you need to know what's going on within your area. The Black Panthers did that.
You brought that up because I think in Oakland, 1973, they started community schooling. The Black Panthers did. And basically, they looked at the whole child, of course, our community. One of the things that I liked is, they taught the school from an African-American perspective. Kids got 3 meals a day. So they were fed, and you already know what happened with that. The school lasted, I think it closed in 1981. But in 2010, the Oakland School District came back and said, you know what, community schooling was a good idea. So now they've reinstituted that community schooling in the school district. And I think that for me, I would say just blow the whole school system up, start all over. Because
change the whole paradigm.
Back in, I think it was 1837, Horace Mann, who was the Secretary of Education in Massachusetts, he was the one that they call the godfather of the schooling system as we see it now. And he took it from something called the Prussian model. And basically what that was a system where you sit the kids in a class, you be obedient, you sit there, you listen, it's structured, it's regimented, and they were basically just kind of teaching the kids how to be robots, factory workers, things of that nature. That's still the basis of our educational system now. And what I don't understand coming from a Black male perspective is now we see the advent of the whole mental health challenge thing, where you've got these white teachers and they don't understand Trevante, and he's, a little active in class. So instead of, trying to tailor educational plan for him, they label, oh, he needs help. He needs Ritalin. And we already know the effect that that's having.
But that's a teacher that's making that identification.
Exactly.
It's not a counselor. They used to have in-house counselors. They used to have, different professionals. And we joke about it a lot, but we know in middle school, there were all kind of staff that was in school dealing with
social workers.
You had everything.
Staff. Yep.
You had clinical staff. You had everybody that was dealing with, Trevante. Because we knew he had issues. We knew he was a little different. We didn't know, autism and spectrum and all that stuff back then, but we just called everybody special. He was special. But there were people that were able to work with that particular individual and assimilate them back into the normal culture. Now, like I said, you've got teachers that are making that, I can't deal with him, he's got an issue. And then you're going to separate that child. Teachers that are not familiar with Black culture. And we know this from not only just teachers, but, police officers. You see some people, Black people talking loud, they're automatically thinking it's going to be a fight. That's a cultural thing.
Right.
If we're doing the dozens or capping or whatever we called it back then, and I'm saying your mama this and your mama this, oh, they're about to fight. No, it's cultural differences. So when you start eliminating even not only just the curriculum, but also just, we're going to homogenize the classroom. And even that model that you talked about is based on agricultural. You out in the summertime so you can go farm.
Exactly.
We don't farm anymore. I mean,
antiquated system.
It's very antiquated.
And that's why I say I don't think in my lifetime I'll live to see the system blown up and started all over again from scratch. For whatever reason, whether it be cultural, whether it be historical, we seem to get the raw end of the stick. We are still looked at as a threat. And I think, partially because of the media and where we are today, we see these examples of, thugs, so on and so forth. White folks watch this. So when little Johnny come into the class and he got dreads, they've already had a preconceived notion about, okay, he's a trouble starter. So now I got to keep my eye on him. As soon as he speaks out of turn, you're suspended. You got to go home. I can't deal with you. You're a problem. So when we talk about teachers and all of the things that have been put on them, because counselors and, school nurses, those positions have been eliminated. And you think about it, it goes back to funding. Because I really think that, here in the state of Michigan, they have mismanaged that money so much, it's ridiculous. Did we have problems with books? I don't remember that.
No.
Kids ain't got toilet paper in the schools now. So,
they have a list of things they got to bring to school in the public school. Tissue, disinfectant wipes. And I'm going like, what am I? And every kid is getting this list.
And that's taxpayers funded. It's like we're paying for this building, this institution to be here. So,
I guess here's a question I have. So, we know that there's a need for a revamping of the educational system. I looked at in Michigan, 86% of Black students are graduating high school in Michigan. 86%. That's been a steady decline to a peak of college enrollment. I just said college enrollment, it was a peak in 2010, all-time high. It's been a steady decline since then.
You said 86 sounds high.
86 did sound high to me, but we're talking about as a whole.
Male and female.
Male and female.
Okay.
And we're not talking about just in the Tri-County area, because we think, because we know that, Detroit Public Schools, I think it's around in the high 50s.
That's right. I'm thinking just
58, 59%.
So
you're talking about statewide.
I'm talking about statewide.
Okay.
But even statewide, okay, I'm graduating from high school, I'm going to college. That's been a steady decline since 2010. We know who was president in 2010. I'm gonna leave it there. And what are the things that he ran a platform on. So, but there's a steady decline since then. However, because of the antiquated system, we know, like I said, is around agricultural. You've got a lot of schools that are pushing STEM, science, math, technology, engineering. If you're doing that and you've seen students that are declining in college enrollment, because if I'm learning STEM all through school, the next step is typically some type of college program or secondary education. What are we doing? Oh, how do we address that? I mean, those two things don't match. The educational model doesn't match to what we aspire them to be. And I think that if we're looking at Black students in particular, Black males, you can be a scientist, you can be a mathematician, you can be a engineer.
Or a teacher.
Or a teacher.
For that matter.
But all of those things are going to require secondary education.
Yeah.
So how do we keep the kids even interested to push that number up to, 90?
Well, I mean, I think we first need more Black male teachers, Black teachers for that matter. One of the things that I find very interesting is, and Carl, Lamont, you probably have experienced the same thing, friends, family that have gone to HBCUs. And one of the things that to a person they all say is how inspiring it was for them. They had teachers that, built into them and showed them, you can do this. But the question I had to myself is, you had to wait till college to get to this point to where you saw somebody that says you can do it. We've got to start at an earlier age. We got to reach these kids when they're in elementary school, so that they're not focused on trying to be a rapper or a basketball player, a football player, And then I don't think that it's necessary to actually push all of the academia professions. I mean, you could be a plumber, you could be an electrician. You can do all of these things and make nice money.
They used to have that in the public schools too.
Exactly. So I think that, for us, there has to be a push made because it takes a village. I know that, our parents were probably, vested in us as we were coming up in terms of schooling. My mom or dad didn't go past high school, but still two of the smartest people I ever met. And they built into us, that work ethic that, hey, you can do whatever you set your mind to. And now what I see, especially with the young Black males, is it's almost as if they're defeated, and if they don't have somebody that's building into them, then how can we expect them to excel when it comes to school? And because the educational system, in my opinion, has been whitewashed beyond belief, there's nothing that, I see that we can do right now that can change that. But again, and it's just my opinion, let's blow it up. Because, it's going to take a lot. It's going to take us voting. It's going to take us getting, the right people into these political offices, the school boards, so on and so forth. Because even when we were coming up, I remember the school boards, these were people we held in high esteem. Now it's almost as if I'm just trying to get this position to move on to the next position.
Shit, I remember going to school board meetings when I was in high school.
I remember the school board superintendent coming out to the school.
Yes.
And that was a big deal. It was like, oh, we got, but now if you ask kids who is the school board, they don't even know what they don't even know what the school board is. But I know, Lamont, that you have a lot of background in charter schools. So is charter schools the answer?
So here in Detroit is about 50-50 now. Matter of fact, I believe it's more charters than it is public.
Wow.
And in the city, that's just how the what is it, the levers, have moved. I do still sit on the board for Warrendale, and you mentioned HBCUs, and each year we do have, and these are grade school kids, they do a HBCU tour, right? So these like 5th, 6th graders go to about half a dozen, a summer tour. Normally that's done in high school, all right? But we get them engaged very early.
That's
individualized approach for those students so that they can dream big. Like you can dream for the stars. You want to be a NASA astronaut. I ain't make that, but now I'm an engineer for NASA and I'm building the rockets. That kind of paradigm. But Eugene, to go to your question, individualized approach for those students to get them in at that ninth grade level. All right. And to see who they are, to ask about them, to know about their family. Say, we're going to take you on this course. Not any different from if Carl was a Class A basketball player recruited by a bunch of universities. All right. School come to him. Kentucky comes to him. Brings his parents in, and ideally they would want to keep Carl for that whole 4 years. Now with NIL and everything, a little different, but it's the same premise. All right, so we're going to invest in you, and to see what are your aspirations, and how can we tailor an educational experience to take you there, but to hold you accountable, to check on you on a regular basis.
Okay, so then from a charter school standpoint, funding.
Yeah.
Because we know that's a big problem with the public school system. So who controls the purse strings in the charter schools?
Charters get the same money that public schools get.
Okay.
The difference in regards to Prop A is basically say you're in West Bloomfield. Those residents can vote to say we're going to allocate more of our property taxes to our school district to augment what is the average per pupil funding for, as a whole.
Right.
So if you're in Detroit, say it's averaging about 9,000 per pupil, but you in West Bloomfield, that could be 13, 15,000 a student.
Because those are called millages. That they
Millages,
vote
exactly.
On. Okay.
Exactly. So again, intentionality. They moved out there for that purpose, to get away from the urban district and to say, hey, we're going to take our money and we're going to invest it in our public schools, so we don't have to pay $20,000, $30,000 for the country days. The private institutions. We can pretty much fund this just out of our homes, as long as we're away from, those people. But yes, that makes a disparity, because like you've driven by some of the nicest, some of the elementary schools.
Oh,
Out
absolutely.
They're
in Bloomfield
campuses.
Hills.
That's
Oh,
what they are.
absolutely.
They're campuses. They're not schools.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, they're already in a different area. So
And I
I'm sorry.
think that, and see, there's another issue with that, because we, us, black folk,
Mhm.
we're gonna follow white folk. We're gonna start moving to the West Bloomfield,
the water cooler
Bloomfield
there.
Hills. We're gonna do that to show that we are able to do that. As we do that, and we're in those public school areas, because we're doing the same thing. We want to have a nice house, and we don't want to pay for this private education, so we're gonna move out here. I'm not disparaging that, but at the same time, you're not doing what you just talked about with the freedom schools and the Hebrew schools. You're not taking those kids after school and almost having to deprogram them, because those districts can whitewash education.
and they do.
And they do. Oh yeah.
And, you get a kid that's graduating in high school, from high school, and he thinks that he's on par with, Becky and Chuck. And Becky and Chuck, because their parents have prioritized education, they understand, I'm going to send my kid to college, probably the same one I went to, because I know the dean and I can get him into U of M. I can get him into, Brown or whatever.
It's a legacy enrollment.
It's easy. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
But, Devontae, work hard and you'll probably make it. And you really don't have a background. You think you're on par with those kids. And if the parents haven't instilled in them, like, listen, we always heard it growing up, you got to work twice as hard to get half as much.
Mhm.
And they're not believing that nowadays. They think that they're on par because, Becky got an A, I got an A.
Mhm.
How did Becky get into U of M and I got a rejection letter? Well, Becky had legacy.
Help.
She had help.
Becky had
And
assistance.
you're going to you work hard. So I think that without giving context, without giving, again, having a curriculum that talks about, just going to say it, white privilege. And you don't have to state it as that. It just is what it is. I had a history professor in college who talked about, he was black, and I think I was one of maybe only 3 black students in the class. And when he got to, I think we were talking about Reconstruction, and he started talking about how things were torn down in Reconstruction, and black people used to have, were, elected officials in the beginning. And then, so he's talking about it, but he's talking about it in, this is what it was.
Mhm.
And you could see people getting offended, like, but that's what
It's
it
the truth.
was. Yeah, it's like,
Exactly.
that's what it was.
Mhm.
So this whole, trying to dismantle these programs are just, as we know, just to spare white people's feelings.
Yeah.
But in doing that, you're
And they've
harming.
explicitly said that
And they are explicitly saying
about
that.
their kids.
Exactly.
Hell with your kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So my point is, yes, we have to vote. Yes, we have to make sure that we're speaking up. But is there a way to, and this is just, and I don't know the answer to this, but is there a way to say, that's enough? We got to stop.
Well,
This is.
I think it takes more of us to stand up and actually be interested in overall well-being of our kids. I'm not sure if it's a popular opinion, what I feel, but I think that, for instance, my wife travels. She just came back from Ghana on Christmas time. And I'm nervous, quite honestly, to travel outside of the United States because of the fact that these other countries, they look at us like Okay, y'all think y'all the ish. And the one thing that stands out to me is 9/11.
Mm.
I thought back to what Minister Malcolm said when Kennedy got assassinated. Chickens have come home to roost.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I feel about 9/11. And just the overall arrogance that a lot of countries think the United States had. We live that every day.
Well, it's not that they think; it's that we have.
Yes, and we live that
Right
every
now.
day
Yeah.
being black men. And our black males that are coming up, they're being taught, that you have to be subservient in order to ascend. For instance, talking about college, years ago they talked about how the SAT and the ACT were culturally biased. We've known that forever. Nothing's changed with that. And with the pandemic, thank God, a lot of colleges were just foregoing it and saying, hey,
Yeah.
you ain't got to
You
take
need to
it.
score.
Just come on in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something that we need to discuss too. If you're going to have these standardized tests, then these tests need to be culturally appropriate. But to your point, Carl, white folks ain't interested in learning about Black history. So if you had that question on the ACT about somebody other than Rosa Parks or Dr. King, then Becky's not going to get it right. And guess what? Becky's family is going to raise holy hell because they go, well, why is this question on here? But we haven't taken the time because, in my opinion, the educational system wasn't designed for Black folks.
And here's the thing about the standardized testing too. So just keep this in mind. Like you said, we always knew they were culturally biased tests.
Mm-hmm.
But again, our college enrollment has been on a decline. White college enrollment has pretty much stays the same.
Yeah.
So if we said, okay, this test is a barrier to us going to college, why are we still not going to college? The elimination was really for the white kids that was too dumb to get a good score.
Oh, of course.
So again, it's to placate for them, to me. And this is just my opinion. But if you look at the data, I think it'll play it out. We don't want to give them an inferiority complex because they scored a 10 on the ACT. We know they're smart. We see their grades. We see their extracurricular. They're more than qualified. They're the whole scandal of all those Hollywood people paying for their kids to get into USC. Paying for them for false scholarships to, I'm on the rowing team. The kid has never been in a boat.
Yep.
And
They just cut a check.
Just cut a check. But at the same time, you're hearing legislators, these Democrats are college elitists and you don't have to go to college. This is America. You can just work hard. But you're cutting checks to send your kid to either the same school you went to or better schools.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's the same thing in these suburban school districts.
Yeah.
Their kids are going to college. Their kids are not, even going into skilled trades. And a lot of money, and this is a whole nother show, I think, but a lot of money can be made in skilled trades. And I think that's one of the answers for Black students.
But you do know there are barriers in that too.
There are barriers in that too.
Yeah.
Because I know there's still racism that are in the unions and
Exactly.
and all of that stuff. So there are a lot of barriers. So we have to talk about all of those. But I can't look at somebody who is making, 6 figures a year, who went to an elite college, tell my kids that's not necessary. You live in America. You can make it happen.
If I can just add to
Go ahead.
what you mentioned earlier, the advanced placement courses, if you remember the African American studies,
Mm-hmm.
how they either eliminated or they sanitized it.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
All right, where I guess for some schools you don't even get credit. That's how discreet it is. Just complete elimination with that. But I will say this: you're from the trades perspective. You're right. There is some of these community colleges. If I could do it over,
Mm-hmm.
all right,
Yes.
plumbing, be electrician. I mean, you can go into some trades without having all that college debt. Come out certified, and while you trying to pay off that 8-10 years later, trying to find that job, hopefully starting, as what, 40,000-50,000 a year, and homeboy is already, out
He done
here.
started his own company
Start
after
ex-
about 5-6 years. He
Okay.
went out on his own.
All
Yeah.
right. Even my barber is banking
Mm-hmm.
cash,
See.
right? Okay,
But see,
30,
and that's
40 bucks like that, a pop of, I mean, but
that's
anyway.
something that we don't
So-
don't publicize because that's not sexy.
Yeah.
You know, to the
Yeah.
young men coming up now. And I'm saying to myself, all this stuff you're seeing on social media, that's a facade, son.
Mhm.
You know, this stuff ain't, or you want to be a rapper. I told my son, I said, okay, let's look at some of the most famous and successful rappers. Jay-Z, for example. He's a billionaire now. But guess what? There was a time when I swear Jay-Z was putting out an album every 6 months.
Mhm.
So you got to be on your grind.
There's a work ethic involved.
Yeah.
in
And they don't
everything.
see that. You know, they see somebody that did a video on YouTube and blew up. Well, guess what? Tell me where he gonna be in 3, 4, 5 years if he didn't continue on that grind.
While those projects were financed by nefarious. I mean, we won't get down to it.
No,
You know what I mean?
No.
So
I've read a couple of books on, the origins of hip hop, and we know that most of it was funded through drug money.
Yeah.
But you can
Hell,
say
you gotta work to be a drug dealer.
You can say the same for Motown too, but that's another.
that is true.
we are in Detroit. So nobody's cousin.
Right. I don't.
Barry Gordy's third cousin on
But-
his wife's uncle's side.
But I mean, it is. But at the same time, the funding, that was one thing, but the work ethic is still the work ethic on
That's
both
true.
sides. You still got to have talent. You still got to have the work ethic to be whatever it is.
Mhm.
And I'm glad you said something about student debt. That's I took a college tour for my daughter. We went to Chicago, so she looked at a bunch of schools in Chicago. One of them was Northwestern.
Mm.
Presentation in Northwestern was our goal. They gave a great presentation. The campus is intimate. I didn't know for a Big Ten school it was a small campus. And they talked about, one of the professors gave a lecture. He said, I had a student. A student was doing some study groups. It was like 10 o'clock at night. They sent me an email. I happened to be up. I don't live far. I came to the student union and we sat till 1 a.m. just having a discussion. He's like, I'll do that for my students. I see they're interested. So I'm like, this is something. So at the end of the presentation, they said, well, one of the things that we want to do here at Northwestern is we want all of our students, or as many as possible, to graduate with zero debt. So that, of course, piqued my interest. Okay, let's go. Well, this is how they make that happen. You as a parent, you're going to fill out all this information about your financials. And what they're going to do is, okay, I see you have $150,000 in your 401k. All right, we're going to take $100,000 of that. See you have a vacation home on Lake Michigan. Take a second mortgage out on that. See your kid had a savings account you opened up when they were a child. Looks like about $5,000 in there. We're going to take that. So now you're in debt. You're behind the 8 ball. But guess what? Your kid graduated
debt
free. Because we're going to do all of those things first. Before we start looking at scholarships, before we start looking at grants, before we start looking at any type of financial aid, we're going to take from you first. Now, the thing about that was, those parents, they didn't look like us. Sounds great to me.
But you, on the other hand, you be in your 70s working at damn Walmart.
And I said, well, time to go to the next college.
Yes.
which weren't, listen, they weren't any better. I'm looking at these schools and thank God that she ended up going to a local college here, Oakland. Shout out to Oakland University.
Mm.
But the way we were looking at the financials of these schools and the parents that weren't batting an eye.
Mm.
And I'm saying, DePaul, I want to say was close to $100,000 a year.
Mhm.
A year.
Devil is a lie.
And I'm saying, this is, I mean, educational wise and all that kind of stuff, that's great. And those kids, I'm sure, are graduating from those schools and they got a foot up. Hopefully they would have a foot up on, other competition. But looking at it, the landscape as a whole,
Mhm.
depending on the field you want to go into, college is college.
Yeah. That's right.
And the ones that have the complexion for the connection, they're gonna make it anyway. But again, I think that there's got to be a way, and I don't know if blowing it up is necessarily the right option. I hear what you're saying, and a lot of things you want to blow up, but there's got to be a way that we can figure out, one, to stop the bleeding from them, from the powers that be trying to take away everything black, and two, reinforcing that this is necessary, not just for our students, but for everybody. And I think that's where it's coming in at. They know that this would kind of shake the room, so
I
to
think
speak.
one of the things that will bring about some change, Carl, to your point, is we can't all do it by ourselves. We gonna need some allies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important aspect to look at this, bringing this change about. Whether you blow it up or whether you revamp it, you're gonna have to have allies. And I don't have a problem with, having somebody that is truly interested and truly vested in changing the system, because there are a lot of folks out there that, see that the change needs to take place. And I think that was clearly evident these last few years we've gone through, the George Floyd situation and all that. In some instances, when you watched it on TV, you saw more black folks out there marching, more white folks out there marching than black folks. So some of the younger ones, they're just as upset as we are. But I think it has to be a combination of both, because historically, we have not, as black people, had the backbone, all of us, to say, you know what, I'm willing to die for this cause.
And
I'm willing to sacrifice for this cause.
Not so coincidentally, that's when the whole push for elimination of DEI started, right after George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
Right after
backlash.
You saw white folks saying enough is enough. Then, as again, the powers that be, and I say the powers that be meaning those who want to conserve white power, said, okay, we got to stop these young white kids from trying to assimilate, from trying to fight for, equality and, kumbaya and peace among all men.
Well, they humanize black folks, their kids.
Absolutely.
And it's not in, I just keep it real, it's not in their best interest. See, I'll give credit to these folks codifying these changes in the school system, because they're looking generationally. They're saying, you know what, equality to them seems like oppression.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And they cannot imagine that their kids are seeing folks that they consider less than equal to. All right. You can't walk with them. All right. So if I don't catch my son or daughter who has some friends that they met in school, black friends that they just cool with, if I can't catch that one person, you know what? I'm going to catch some future generations, because we need to keep, as I like to consider it, this caste system, American caste system in place.
Right.
One thing I give them credit is that they are being honest about it. All right. It used to be more clandestine before, but they're just flat out with it. Like, we need to eliminate these things for our white kids. We don't even consider your children, even though you pay the same tax dollars into those schools. So Eugene, what you were talking about in regards to breaking it down, it really gets at school boards. If you don't have control in those particular districts, whether you're the district superintendent or you're on the school board controlling the curriculum, they will run right over you. But it's based upon that individual state, that individual district. So, in other words, can't break it. It's all separated out, so you can't break everything down in totality at one time. You have to, decide, okay, I live in this particular area. So how, and I'm going to get my folks together. We're going to run to have at least a majority on the school board, so that we can block the Moms for Liberty, the Daughters of the American Revolution, from them putting in, all this crap.
And
basically,
I think that's why I said I appreciate to break everything down. Because I'm a burn everything to the ground type of person anyway. But I think what you said about being able to come in and take control Because like you, and I'm the same way. I appreciate racism in my face.
Yeah.
I appreciate you saying I don't like you.
Save me a lot of time.
It saves me a lot of time. I don't have to guess. I don't have to say, well, what did this comment mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want my kids to feel uncomfortable because my family held your family as slaves. So I want to eliminate any kind of talk about that.
Mhm.
They should be, and you're going to be okay with that because I hold the power.
And see, the thing that kills me is that they say, well, it wasn't me. I didn't hold your family as slaves. Well, guess what? Your ancestors did. And the fact that you want to sweep this up under the rug tells me that you still feel that way. You still feel like we are subservient. And I tell my sons all the time, I'll be damned if I allow anybody to come in my face and attack me from a racial standpoint. I'm not putting up with that crap. And I think sometimes some of us as Black people will kowtow, thinking that, okay, if I do what I'm supposed to do, I'll be all right. No, the hell you won't.
That's why I'm saying there's not enough fight. That's why my thing is we have to do something.
Yeah.
We have to stop kowtowing. We have to stop trying to get in, make way to fit in and get in to fit in and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If there's something that is said or done in your work environment, in your neighborhood, in your school system, you got to speak up.
That's right.
I need you to know how I feel. I need other, because the thing about it is, I think if one person speaks up, that might give the courage for others to speak up, because everybody's kind of looking around like, oh, I don't want to rock the boat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to let somebody offend me, and I say, well, I'm not going to say anything back because that might offend them. That makes absolutely no sense to me.
Wait a minute, Carl. Isn't just posting on Facebook that you're mad about a particular topic enough?
To my friends, to my Facebook friends, who all are me. And that's the thing. No, I know you are. Yeah. But that's what you think people are. But that's what it is. It's like, I'm so sick of this, yada, yada, yada. And everybody on there is your cousin. It's like, and you got a whole list of comments. That's right. Fight the power. And nobody's seeing
Ain't nobody
that.
doing nothing.
Nobody's seeing that.
That's the thing.
Yeah, no, I'm saying we had a conversation last week that with social media and everything, how it is today, you wouldn't have a Mississippi boycott, if we were in the 60s, because there's a complacency. And the unfortunate thing is a lot of Black folks just don't want to sacrifice anything. Like, a lot of folks like, look, I came from the hood, but I was fortunate enough to work real hard to get this nice house in Southfield or West Bloomfield. I'm happy with my family. I'm going to be in this little cocoon. I'm going to go to this nice school district. And whatever happens on the other side of 8 Mile, where I came from, let them fight for themselves. The collectivism that we used to have back in the 60s when when you talk about the Black Panthers, that is it's not the same. This generation is just be chilling. They just trying to make their dollars and just stay quiet, and then be encouraged and impressed by some of these folks that be on social media or some of these shows where I call them Trojan horses, the Charlemagnes and cats who are in a certain social strata that whatever they say is not going to impact their money. So like you'll have an Ice Cube or, some folks like that. Vote if you want, vote for Trump or whatever. It's craziness right
and
now.
then
I'm going on some tangents.
No, you're right.
We've talked about Mr. O'Shea Jackson.
Yeah, we brought that up.
But it's just that young people, when they're watching these things, if you don't have a counter narrative, all right, then all we're building is just folks. It's like, hey, the phone don't mean anything to me. Where I'm sitting here around where we knew when we was when we were teens, how important those things were.
We talked about this before, Lamont. How when it comes to voting, I'm voting for dog catcher. I'm voting for every election that comes up because I know the sacrifices that our forefathers made just for us to have the right, to vote. And, just to get back on topic with the schooling and the Afrocentric charter schools that are out there, how do you think that could possibly be instituted on a larger scale? I mean, is there an opportunity for that to seep over into the public school system?
Let's see. So now they call Detroit community schools. I still call Detroit public schools. You have Paul Robeson, Malcolm X Academy, Dr. Jeff Robinson, who I'm good friends with, like a surrogate brother of mine. I think is one other African Center Academy, but to increase that, the school board would need to do it. So
See, there we go.
why is after what is it? The first academy came on board, I want to say about 30, 40 years ago. Why you only have 2 or 3 here in 2024 in a majority black district?
Not a majority. I mean, an overwhelmingly
Exactly.
majority black
Yeah.
district.
I don't know the answer. You know that.
So
ain't
do you
question.
think it would
So-
help for us to promote the successes of these Afrocentric schools?
Oh, most certainly.
I mean,
And-
because a lot of people don't know, that they're even out there. People are driving their kids to Southfield and out to West Bloomfield, so on and so forth. But if you have these schools that are Afrocentric, and I think in order to promote them, you have to talk about the positive aspects of it. Because some of these young kids that are coming through, we're building leaders of tomorrow,
right.
And in order for us to bring this change about and to continue, we've got to have new leaders come up, through the ranks. And I think it's very important, from an educational standpoint, to know where you've come from. We are the descendants of kings and queens.
That's right.
So we have to take pride in ourselves. We have to take pride. We have to take accountability. A lot of times, I tell my sons, you're in the position you're in because of the choices you made.
That's right.
So if we can impart upon, especially our younger generation, especially, the teachers that are coming up, I would love to see more black male teachers, because I know that that's going to, have a positive effect upon. Now, granted, I didn't want to be a teacher, but I love the fact that I had teachers that were vested in me and they were, Eugene, you can do this, or would call me out on some BS. Because white teachers, again, they don't give a damn about these black kids, the majority of them. So, everything from school funding to get some of these, positions that have, been forced out, the counselors and things of that nature. We had our counselor, Carl, in high school. He talked to us all the time.
All the time.
And those things are important to see that we're willing to build into, these young brothers coming up. And I'm not discounting sisters, but we're black men. So I think it's incumbent upon us to, look back and see what we can do to offer any type of insight that will help. And I think teachers, are the greatest thing ever if they're doing it for the right reasons. Because again, I think we do need allies to change the system, to blow it up, or to revamp it. But there are several different issues. There are a lot of variables that go into this, Lamont, to your point. So I just want to say, I'm all for changing. Blowing up.
It has to be. It has to change. Yeah. It has to change. Like I said, I don't know if burning to the scorched earth approach is the best way. I mean, not that I'm opposed to it, but I think that us standing up and again, that 60s type revolutionary attitude has to come back. It has to be in the forefront. We can't be too comfortable to not speak up. And I think that's where we are. We're in a position of being, comfortable. I don't want to rock the boat, but the boat is rocking. So
if it be informative, if this conversation is extended for a future podcast, I can have, our principal from Warrendale here for a podcast, and I can also have my brother on the public school side. So, in other words, educators who's there, on the daily, I think it's some questions that some excellent questions you're asking that the folks that are in the trenches would be best, to answer, particularly about the history, and how things went about. So,
yeah, I mean, I see this as something we'll definitely revisit this, because I think it's something that, it's important to all of us sitting here, and it's something that we can definitely take a deeper dive into. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we know that things need to change. And however we can play a part in that, I'm more than willing to, be on the front lines, because it's important to me. It apparently is important to you guys as well. Family, I just want to say thank you for being here with us. And this conversation has been very intuitive. It's been informative, and hopefully you've learned something. So, at the end of the day, we just want to say, stay prayerful, stay positive, stay patient, and stay peaceful. See you guys next time.